Good morning, everyone. Today, our group will analyze Spain's tourism, transportation, and entertainment sectors, focusing on a promising industry within this ecosystem. I'll begin by introducing our focal industry and company. Our focal industry is Spain's public transportation and high speed rail market, which plays a central role in supporting both domestic mobility and international tourism. Our focal company is Renfe, Spain's national rail operator and a leading participant in the high speed rail segment. Specifically, we focus on Renfe's ADE high speed rail service, which connects major economic and tourist hubs across Spain. Spain operates one of Europe's largest high speed rail networks, and rail dominates key corridors such as Madrid Barcelona, where it captures over 80% modal share. This reflects both infrastructure strength and strong consumer adoption. For our strategic focus, we consider cross border EU expansion opportunities, particularly in France, where integration within the European rail market presents future potential growth.
So Spain's tourism and entertainment sectors depend heavily on transportation access, and Renfe sits at the heart of this organization, playing a strategic role in kind of enabling that domestic travel. These services account for about 75% of Spain's GDP, with tourism and mobility as kind of the core drivers of these services. And the transportation networks kind of enable that tourism, and they connect major cultural and entertainment hubs. For example, we know as we're going on our own Spain trip that we will be taking a rail from Madrid to Bilbao. Very similarly, kind of this national rail operator that we've been talking about, Renfe, is the central pillar of this domestic mobility and tourism access. The tourism revenue in Spain has historically exceeded $100 billion annually, according to MarketLine. The travel ecosystem includes, of course, airlines, hotels, attractions, and rail. And Renfe is kind of very good at connecting these cities, festivals, and historic destinations, which kind of makes it at the central pillar of tourism. This high-speed rail supports kind of that city-to-city leisure that we've been kind of talking about as we're going from Madrid to Bilbao. There's also Madrid, Barcelona, Seville corridors that kind of strengthen domestic tourism as well as supporting international tourists who come to visit the country. Spain is also a major exporter of transport-related goods and services. This kind of we talked about in our first session of class and is verified by the OEC website. Renfe's high-speed AV network is also a backbone of the national mobility, basically linking these major kind of economic ports as well as tourism centers. So it kind of works bilaterally in that sense. And the rail connectivity reduces travel time between the top destinations as well, whereas by a car or by a road, things could take longer. So it increases weekend and short stay tourism. Basically, this extensive high-speed rail infrastructure integrated with tourism corridors, it makes this Renfe company and the tourist structure really, really well adapted. It has strong EU connectivity as well, supporting travel inflows and service exports. And the rail basically enhances accessibility to cultural sites, events, and other entertainment clusters. But again, this really depends on seasonal tourism, which can be very volatile. There can also be some infrastructure strain in peak destinations, especially with high usage. There's also competition from airlines and low-cost carriers, especially low-cost domestic airlines. And then there's always a need for continued moderation and digital ticketing innovation, and then also the upkeep and maintenance of the rail and the seating.
Now, I'll briefly walk through the competitive landscape of Spain's commercial high-speed rail market. First, Renfe, headquartered in Madrid, is a state-owned incumbent operator. It runs the AVE high-speed network and its low-cost brand, Avlo. Renfe holds about 60% market share, generating approximately 1.46 billion euros in commercial high-speed revenue. Its advantages include nationwide network scale, strong brand equity, and first-mover infrastructure familiarity. Second, Ireo, headquartered in Valencia, represents the first private high-speed rail entrant in Spain. It is owned by a consortium including Trenitalia, Italy's national rail operator, along with Spanish partners Air Nostrum, a regional airline, and Globovia, an infrastructure investment firm. This ownership structure combines rail expertise, aviation know how, and infrastructure investment capability. Ireo positioned itself as a premium private alternative and has captured about 24% market share, generating roughly 305 million euros in revenue. Third, Wigo, headquartered in Madrid, is operated by SNCF Voyageurs, part of French state-owned SNCF Group. Wigo competes as a low-cost, high-speed option, emphasizing affordability and simplified service. It currently holds about 16% market share with around 164 million euros in revenue. Overall, Spain's high speed rail market illustrates a competitive oligopoly where differentiation occurs on price, service quality, and frequency.
Let me briefly explain Porter's five forces for Spain's public transportation market. So the first, the threat of new entrants is low. The industry has strict regulations, limited infrastructure access, and very high capital requirements. Urban systems operate on government concessions, and rail operators must secure licenses and track access. These barriers make entry very difficult. Second, supplier power is high. Rail infrastructure is controlled by ADIF, and operators must pay track access fees. The industry also depends on specialized train manufacturers, unionized labor, and energy inputs, which limits bargaining power and increases cost pressure. Third, the threat of substitutes is moderate. In cities, private cars and ride hailing services create strong competition. However, on major high speed rail routes like Madrid to Barcelona, rail dominates with about 81.5% market share, so substitution is weaker there. Fourth, competitive rivalry varies by segment. Urban markets are relatively stable due to concession systems, while high-speed rail is more competitive, with operators competing on price, frequency, and service. Finally, buyer power is moderate. Passengers are price sensitive, especially in high-speed rail, where competition increases consumer choice. So overall, the industry has strong entry barriers and supply power, but competitive intensity depends on the segment.
Thanks, Edmund. Now I'm going to discuss an important opportunity for Renfe, their extended 600-meter car train transport. These trains are designed to transport finished, completed vehicles from the Renault factory in Palencia to the port of Santander for export. The train cars are designed to be extra long with double-decker storage that allows for 15% more capacity than a standard train car transport. An image of the actual train is shown below. These dedicated train cars allow for a logistics scheme that increases exports and collaboration amongst Spanish railways, ports, and manufacturers. From the data we've seen, Spain exported $42.6 billion worth of cars in 2024, with the largest two destinations being Germany and France. Renfe's car train transport to the Port of Santander is perfectly positioned to capitalize on this. Thank you.
Building on our industry analysis, Ranfi's AV high speed rail service represents a clear example of trade in services within the EU. Through cross border expansion into France, Renfe generates revenue from international passengers traveling between Spain and France. This is enabled by EU rail liberalization policies introduced by the European Commission, which allow competition across member states. France is a strategic target market because it is one of Spain's largest trading partners and a major tourism corridor. According to 2023 trade data from the Observatory of Economic Complexity, Spain and France maintain strong bilateral trade flows, particularly in automobiles and industrial goods. Beyond passenger services, rail infrastructure also supports Spain's exports economy through freight operations that transport vehicles to major ports. This creates a dual trade impact, exporting transportation services through AVE while also supporting goods exports. However, expansion into France increases competitive rivalry, particularly against SNCF, which intensifies industry competition but also validates the attractiveness of the corridor. Overall, AV's cross-border strategy strengthens EU economic integration, supports sustainable transport goals, and positions Ramphia as a competitive player in Europe's liberalized rail market.